good morning, everyone. I want to start with two statements that you might find slightly contradictory. I'm going to sort of continue the general theme that we've been touching on for the past few weeks. But I want to bring some passages to you from the Old Testament. David, if you could turn me down a bit. I can justify that to some degree at least. In Luke chapter 24 we get the story that we call the road to Emmaus. And Jesus speaks to the two disciples and they don't recognize him. And they go, oh, everything's fallen apart. Luke 24:25, if you got it. You'll know this well enough. He said to them, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things, and then enter his glory? And this is it. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. So we're going to look at some bits in the Old Testament that concern Jesus and God's plan. And there's another verse in the Old Testament that's quite interesting. Amos chapter 3 and verse 7 says, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. So, what Jesus came and did wasn't a kind of last minute, oops, everything's gone wrong, we need to sort it out. God's plan was being worked out through the whole of the Old Testament. I want to talk to you this morning about Zerubbabel. You might remember last week that Jürgen gave us those lists from Matthew chapter 1 and invited us to say something about, pick one out that says something to you. And I did really well on that. I managed to keep myself talking about 3, I think. But that was a struggle. One of them, I remembered, strangely enough, given that I can't remember most things most of the time, but I remembered a prophecy that was given to Zerubbabel. And so after that on the Sunday I came and looked it up, and I thought it was maybe worth sharing something of that. I have a thing for Zerubbabel and Habakkuk. I don't know whether it's because they've got 3 B's in their name or what. Weird the way things get to you. And also, last week Gordon spoke about family breakdown and dealing with that. And this story that I'd like to take you through this morning is really about a breakdown in God's family relationships. Not between the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, but between God and his people. And what God did to kind of put that back together again. So in that sense, it kind of vaguely fits with where we've been recently. The story starts on page 781 in the Blue Bibles. This is a promise given to David. It's 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16. Sorry, 781? Did I? 781. No, sorry. 311, because I've changed the order. Sorry, 311. 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 16. So this, I think, this is the prophet Nathan speaking prophetically to David. He says, "Your house and your kingdom shall endure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." And we know ultimately that came true in Jesus. And I suppose that's why it was important that the Gospels established Jesus' lineage. I think God's, what he said, pick it up in Deuteronomy and in various other places after that. God said, "If you walk in my ways, follow my ways, then I will bless you." And under David, he did that. Israel grew to the biggest it ever was, because David put God at the center of the nation and so on. So that was the promise. And then the kings following, some of them were really not too good. You remember the kingdom split up under Jeroboam, who was not a very wise person. And I think both in Israel and Judah, some of the kings started worshipping idols and the Baals and so on. So just thinking of how God the Father looked on this, he must have really, like in your family, when somebody does something really bad, it hurts. So God's been in that position, as it were, because his plan was that if his people followed him, then this would be a really wonderful, safe, secure nation, a land literally flowing with milk and honey. But it didn't work out like that. And if you go to page 781, Jeremiah chapter 22, we come to King Jehoiachin. In Matthew's Gospel, it records him as Jeconiah, but apparently it's the same guy, though it can be confusing. He was the last king of Judah before the captivity into Babylon. So chapter 22 verse 24 says, "Surely as I live, declares the Lord, even if you, Jehoiachin, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were a signet ring on my right hand, I would still pull you off." And if I can explain that to some degree, hopefully. Signet ring was used in those days. If a king wanted to go and buy something off another nation, or presumably get grain and other stuff from a merchant, he would give his signet ring to whoever he sent. And the guy would pay a deposit and then presumably put a blob of wax on the bill, and he would put the king's signet ring in it. And that would be essentially a promise, a guarantee that the full bill would be paid in due time. So things got so bad that he's not saying you were a signet ring, but even if you were, I would pull you off, and you wouldn't be a guarantee of things to come. So it's almost like the promise made to David that his throne would endure forever was kind of put on hold. God said, things have got so bad that I can no longer do that. And in fact, Jehoiachin was the last king of Judah. Zerubbabel was appointed governor by the Persians. But after that, there weren't kings of Judah. So in fact, the fact that somebody would sit on the throne in Judah didn't happen again. Now, So Zerubbabel, the name means something like either born in Babylon or son of Babylon, which supposedly means similar things. The people of Judah were turned into exile initially by king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And then when the Persians defeated the Babylonians, their thing was not to take people out of their own country like Nebuchadnezzar had done, but they preferred not to anger the gods of these conquered countries. So they let some of the people from Judah go back, and Zerubbabel was the leader of the first return. Ezra led the second group, and then Nehemiah led the third group. So this is God bringing his people back into Judah. And if you turn to page 949, this is the prophet Haggai. Haggai and Zechariah, who are in two adjacent books there, are contemporaries with Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah. So Haggai chapter 2, if we start at verse 20, the last few verses of the book. The word of the Lord came to Haggai a second time on the 24th day of the month. Tell Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, that I will shake the heavens and the earth. I will overturn royal thrones and shatter the power of the foreign kingdoms. I will overthrow chariots and their drivers, horses and their riders will fall, each by the sword of his brother. And then this is the bit. On that day, declares the Lord Almighty, I will take you, my servant Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and I will make you like my signet ring, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord. So there's a prophecy there that God will overthrow nations. He's in charge of history, as it were. And then he says to Zerubbabel, this was the thing that I remembered, that he will make you like a signet ring. So that again is a guarantee, I think in this case, of the promise that the Messiah would come from David's line. So that part of the promise, as it were, was reinstated. I thought it was quite interesting that God works in this kind of deposit and guarantee fashion. If you turn to Ephesians, page 1173. Ephesians chapter 1, the second half of verse 13 and verse 14 says, having believed, you were marked in him with the seal. Put your signet ring on. The promised Holy Spirit, who is a deposit guaranteeing our inheritance until the redemption of those who are God's possession, to the praise of his glory. So it's almost a parallel. God works in the same way. I suppose we should expect that. He's the same yesterday, today and forever. But I just thought that was a wow promise. You are like my signet ring. So that status that he'd taken off Jehoiachin is restored in Zerubbabel. And obviously he was a worshipper of God. God chose him. So that's it really was a good guy. And one day you could go and chat to him. And then if we move over a few pages to Zechariah, we get another prophecy, page 951. Zechariah chapter 3, verses 1 to 8. The high priest in those days that came back from Babylon with Zerubbabel was a gentleman called Joshua. And Zechariah has this vision. I think he being an angel, verse 3, the angel who was speaking to me, and so on. Then he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. The Lord said to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is this man not a burning stick snatched from the fire?" Now Joshua was dressed in filthy clothes as he stood before the angel. The angel said to those who were standing before him, "Take off his filthy clothes." Then he said to Joshua, "See, I have taken away your sin and put rich garments on you." Then I said, "Put a clean turban on his head." So they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him, while the angel stood by. The angel of the Lord gave this charge to Joshua: "This is what the Lord Almighty says: if you will walk in my ways and keep my requirements, then you will govern my house and have charge of my courts, and I will give you a place among these standing here." Apparently there are some men, it goes on to say, they're symbolic. Listen, O Joshua, and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. So it's a vision, and there's various people around. But it's really interesting what this prophecy contains. Verse 3, Joshua's dressed in filthy clothes. Isaiah says that in front of God, all our righteousness, all we can do that's right, is like filthy rags. Remember that verse? So, kind of Joshua in his own status as high priest was dressed in filthy clothes. And Satan obviously comes and accuses him, and God rebukes Satan because he's chosen Jerusalem. And I think the bit about the burning stick is, this man has been snatched from the fire in Babylon, and he's only, there's still some of him left, and God's going to do something with that which is left. But note, Satan there is doing what he always does. He accuses those the Lord has chosen. So the angel says, "Take off his filthy clothes." And then he said to Joshua, "See, I have taken away your sin and put rich garments on you." Which really sounds very New Testament, doesn't it, almost? That what Jesus did on the cross takes away our own righteousness, our filthy rags. And it's only in him that we are righteous before the Father. And I think Gordon spoke to us a good while back on 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 1, where it talks about you are a holy nation, a royal priesthood, and so on. So a royal priesthood wouldn't be dressed in filthy rags, he'd be dressed in rich garments. And so on. And we sing a song. In royal robes, I don't deserve, I live to serve your majesty. So there is this kind of picture of having our sin taken away and being able to stand in our Father's very presence. It's like taking your dirty clothes off and putting not just plain clean ones, but really nice clean ones on. So again, there's a lot of Old Testament, New Testament linking up there. And then he put a clean turban on his head. That seems to be a kind of symbol of being high priest. I mean, in many societies, if you've got somebody in a special position, they have to wear a funny hat. So he gets his new turban. But again, there's that, if you will walk in my ways and keep my requirements, then God will work through him and bless him and so on. Okay, sorry, the bit that I missed out of that is actually verse 8, where it says, "Listen, O high priest Joshua, and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. I am going to bring my servant, the branch." So part of this prophecy here to Joshua involves the branch. If you turn to page 782, Jeremiah, almost where we were before, I think, Jeremiah 23, verses 5 and 6. "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up to David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will live in safety. This is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness." And that again is a prophecy about Jesus. And I have a feeling I read somewhere that on the turban that would be put on Joshua, it would say, "The Lord our righteousness." And some theologians have expressed this idea that Zerubbabel, the kind of civil leader, and Joshua, the spiritual leader, those two offices will come together in Jesus. So both of these relate to different aspects of Jesus' ministry. And while I was reading around in Zechariah, also on page 951, there's an interesting bit of chapter 2, which is a prophecy, I think, about Jerusalem and Judea. It says, "Shout and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for I am coming. I will live among you, declares the Lord. Many nations will be joined with the Lord in that day and will become my people. I will live among you, and you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. The Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Be still before the Lord, all mankind, because he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. And I think we can relate to quite a lot of that. Many nations will be joined with the Lord in that day and will become my people. That includes us. And I think the end bit, the Lord has roused himself. He's not sitting around not bothering. It's all gone bad, so he's just finished with these lot. He's actually doing something about it. And we get these various prophecies which seem to relate to Jesus and the story of the Gospels. So it's quite interesting. Some of these prophecies in the Old Testament, they will have a fulfillment kind of in a period after that. If God promises them victory against their enemies, then, in due fairly short time, that will come to pass. Obviously, the major victory against our enemy was Jesus on the cross. So there's a fulfillment of the same prophecy a second time in Jesus. And in some cases, there's also a third fulfillment, which will be either when Jesus returns or even in our time. That bit there kind of relates to us coming from all nations and being gathered into God's people. So it's really quite interesting. Some of these prophecies don't just have one fulfillment, but it's all like, I want to talk to you this morning about trifles. Okay, so that was really just, I find that stuff interesting. I hope I wasn't too boring. But I suppose be encouraged that God has a plan, he's had a plan, and it includes you, and he's working it out, and it will end the way he has chosen to end it. Okay, Fish.